Imagine this. A tiny newborn's cry pierces through the silence of a world ruled not by humans, but by terrifying, colossal creatures. No civilization, no protection, just a fragile child taking its very first breath, surrounded by predators that see it as prey. But here's the question: how did humanity's very first child survive in a land where monsters roamed free? And what secrets does this ancient tale hold about our own existence? Long before humans claimed the Earth, this planet was a place of untamed chaos. Vast forests stretched endlessly, unbroken by cities or villages. The skies thundered with wingspans so wide they could block out the sun, while the ground trembled. Beneath the steps of colossal beasts, every shadow could conceal a predator. Every nightfall could mean certain death. In this primal world, survival belonged only to the strong. Razor-toothed creatures stalked the rivers, monstrous fangs flashing as they tore through prey. The oceans were no safer, hiding serpents and leviathans that dragged anything unfortunate into their depths. To exist in such a place required dominance, power, or brute savagery, and yet somewhere within this chaos, something fragile and unexpected was about to appear. What's striking about this world is not just the creatures themselves, but the balance they held. Nature had its own order: predator and prey, hunter and hunted, survival and extinction. Humans did not yet exist, and in truth, the world did not seem to need them. But fate was preparing a surprise one that would rewrite everything to truly. Imagine the world before humans. Picture a place where silence was rare. The earth echoed with roars, screeches, and the constant battle for dominance. Each sunrise was painted in fire and mist, as if nature itself was both beautiful and terrifying at once. There were no shelters, no tools, no voices of reasoning minds. Only instinct guided life here. Predators evolved sharper claws and quicker reflexes, while prey learned to flee, hide, or grow armor thick enough to withstand attacks. It was a constant arms race, a cycle of adaptation where hesitation meant extinction. Yet, within this hostile theater, nature was quietly shaping something extraordinary. A species that did not rely on claws, scales, or raw strength. Something smaller, weaker, but destined to outlast them all. Though the beasts of land and sky ruled with terror, cracks were beginning to form in their dominance. The balance of power, though invisible at the time, was already shifting. The stage was nearly set. Among the shadows of towering creatures and endless dangers, a new kind of life was preparing to emerge, fragile, yet holding within it the spark of survival unlike anything the world had ever seen. As centuries rolled by, the monsters of this world seemed eternal. Some towered like walking mountains, their massive forms blotting out entire valleys. Others lurked unseen, striking from the shadows with venom, wings, or brute force. To them, existence was simple: hunt, dominate, survive. But nature, in its quiet wisdom, was about to introduce a fragile variable that no monster could predict. This world, brutal as it was, became the perfect crucible for something new. The endless dangers acted like a test, preparing the ground for a creature not built on strength but on adaptability. Where monsters relied on instinct, this new being would rely on thought. Where predators fought with teeth and claws, it would fight with fire, strategy, and unity. And so, in the middle of a realm ruled by nightmares, the first breath of humankind was drawing near. A child, small and powerless, destined to challenge the very order of nature. It may have seemed laughable than a helpless infant in a kingdom of giants, but this child represented more than survival. It represented change, the kind that would echo through history and rewrite the fate of the world forever. In the midst of a savage world where monsters ruled, a single event shattered the pattern of nature: the birth of the first human child. There were no palaces to welcome it, no safe haven to cradle its fragile body, only the raw wilderness, echoing with roars and storms. And yet, that tiny cry marked a turning point in Earth's story. But how could such a child have come into being? Myths across cultures whisper of divine intervention, of God shaping humankind from clay, fire, or starlight. Some legends tell of a cosmic accident, where life itself spilled into unexpected form. Science, of course, offers its own explanations, tracing humanity's origins to evolution, survival, and adaptation. Whichever story you believe, one truth remains: this child's arrival was no ordinary birth. It was the beginning of a species destined to defy the odds. Unlike the monsters that surrounded it, the child had no armor, no wings, no fangs. Its only protection lay in the hands of those who would raise it. Perhaps a small tribe of early humans, fragile themselves, yet fiercely protective. Against all reason, this moment was not just about life, it was about hope. The first human child's birth was more than a biological event, it was a symbol. Imagine a world where every sound could give away your position to a predator, where even the smallest mistake meant death. In that hostile landscape, the arrival of such a vulnerable being was both a miracle and a challenge. Some stories describe this child as being protected by divine creatures, hidden away from the monsters that ruled the earth. Others suggest that it survived only because of the collective strength of a small, scattered group of humans, perhaps the very first community formed around the need to protect one of their own. If true, then this single child may have been the spark that ignited humanity's greatest strength: unity. Unlike the beasts that lived alone or in packs driven by instinct, humans would begin to bond over something greater: compassion and shared survival. This fragile infant forced its caretakers to innovate, to stay alert, and to defend together. In a strange way, the child was not the weakest among them. It was the reason they grew stronger. This was not just the birth of a child, it was the birth of an idea: survival through connection. As the child grew, the world around it remained merciless. Shadows hid predators waiting to strike, storms threatened to sweep away entire tribes, and hunger was a constant companion. Yet somehow, this child endured. Each moment of survival was not just luck, it was a lesson written into humanity's story. Perhaps the child's caretakers learned to guard the fire more carefully, realizing its warmth and light kept the beasts away. Perhaps they discovered new ways to forage and hunt, not only to feed themselves, but to provide for the fragile life in their arms. Each small act of protection was a step toward civilization. Myths and legends often portray this first child as something more than human, a symbol of innocence placed in the middle of chaos. But whether divine or ordinary, the truth remains. This child forced humanity to rise above fear. It gave them a reason to fight, to endure, and to dream of something beyond mere survival. In that cry of an infant was hidden the future of a species. The monsters may have ruled the earth in strength, but in that single moment, humanity began to rule it in spirit. The child's birth may have been a miracle, but survival was another battle altogether. Every day was a test, and the world showed no mercy. Towering predators prowled the forests, their eyes gleaming with hunger. Enormous birds of prey circled overhead, waiting for weakness. Even the rivers were treacherous, crawling with creatures that could drag anything beneath the surface in seconds. In such a hostile world, humanity's greatest weapon was not strength, but ingenuity. Fire became their shield, a blazing wall that monsters hesitated to cross. Simple toolstones sharpened into blades, branches shaped into spears turned fragile hands into instruments of survival. Each invention was born out of necessity, driven by the desperate need to protect the child and the tribe. But survival wasn't just about tools, it was about courage. Imagine standing against a beast 3 times your size, armed with nothing but fire and determination. The odds were impossible, yet the will to endure burned brighter. The monsters may have been stronger, but humans were beginning to understand something the beasts could not. Strategy. This was the dawn of a new kind of battle, not of brute force, but of mind against muscle, resilience against raw power. As the child grew, so did the tribe's determination. Protecting one fragile life meant rethinking everything about survival. Monsters hunted alone, relying on sheer strength and instinct. Humans, however, began to realize that their true strength came from unity. Together, they set traps, outsmarting predators too massive to be defeated head-on. They learned the patterns of beasts, their feeding times, their weaknesses, their blind spots. A single human could be prey, but a group, moving as one, could become something far more dangerous. Around the fire, elders shared stories, warnings, and lessons. Knowledge became a weapon sharper than any spear, where monsters repeated the same instincts, generation after generation. Humans improved with each tale passed down. This fragile child was at the center of it, or the reason the tribe adapted, the reason they chose to fight another day. Step by step, survival became less about escaping danger and more about shaping the world around them. With every fire lit, every tool crafted, and every strategy shared, humans carved a place for themselves in a land that once rejected them. And though the monsters still ruled in size, humanity was beginning to rule in spirit. The monsters that once seemed invincible slowly began to lose their grip on the world, not because they grew weaker, but because humans grew wiser. The child who had once been helpless was now walking, learning, and imitating the tribe. With each step it took, it carried forward the lessons carved out of danger and sacrifice. Fire kept the predators at bay. Spears and arrows extended human reach beyond their own hands. Cooperation gave them an advantage no beast could match. And soon, the monsters that once ruled uncontested began to fear the small, fragile beings who refused to surrender. For the first time, humanity wasn't merely surviving, they were reshaping the balance of power. The tribe could face storms together, stand against predators together, and endure hunger together. What began as protection for a single child had transformed into a strategy for an entire species. In that child's survival lay humanity's first victory. A victory not of strength, but of resilience, unity, and imagination. The monsters still roamed, but their reign was no longer absolute. The age of giants was fading, and the age of humankind had begun.